Hi guys, Miss Morse here again. I'm here to read Chapter 5 in Polaris for you. Chapter 5 is called Ghost Stories. They rode out the storm in the captain's cabin. Most of the crew had been at sea for long enough that seasickness was a distant, though unpleasant memory. But not everyone was so lucky. Henry threw up into the chamber pot and then started balefully down at what he had done. His seasickness actually seemed to get worse as the rolling swells began to subside. Manny recalled those miserable days when the gentle rocking could be as bad as rolling. Soon the wind began to die down too. The steady howling reduced to an occasional loud gust. Manny watched the swinging lamp and saw the storm fade in the setting of the shadows. "Just a squall after all," said Aaron. "No," said Owen softly. "The seas were too high. It was a storm, all right. We caught the tail end of it." His voice sounded distracted and distant, so different from its usual bluster that Manny turned around and looked at him. He was sitting in the captain's chair, contemplating a teacup. That was the captain's too, Manny figured. Owen was visibly devastated, like a puppy that had lost their master. An arrogant, know-it-all puppy, but still. One by one, the survivors rose to their feet, except for Owen. The captain's cabin, while a little low for actual adults, was the perfect height for the ship's boys. And whether they'd ridden out a storm or a squall inside, it had lasted only a few hours. Now it was time to the ship and salvage what sleep they could from the remainder of the night. Manny knew one thing for sure. They'd all need their rest. The next day would dawn on a boat without a captain, carpenter, gunner, or doctor. Every crew member, rated able seaman, had been lost by the sea, by choice, by blade, or by bullet. Names and faces flashed through Manny's mind. Maybe not friends exactly. They were all too unequal for that. But some of them had been kind and generous. If there was one silver lining to all the rain, Manny thought with a shudder, it was that there'd be none of their blood left on the deck. "I suppose we should head below deck to sleep then," said Aaron tentatively. Manny shuddered. The cramped confines below deck were dark and dank on any sailing ship, but lately on the Polaris they had become something even worse. And Manny wasn't the only one to feel it. No one moved for a long moment. Finally, Thatcher broke the silence. "Should we?" he said, his voice little more than a whisper. Manny was shocked. It was a crazy thing to say. The crew always slept below deck on the ship, on every ship. And yet, after what had happened on this vessel just hours earlier, and with only the 6 of them left aboard, could anything else on the Polaris truly be called crazy? Reflectively, a few heads looked back at Owen, but he seemed unaware of the exchange. He was lost in his thoughts, still sitting there, contemplating his teacup. "Has he found a crack?" wondered Manny. "Or has he cracked himself? And if so, is he the only one?" There had been sniffles from some of the others as the storm died down, and a few little sobs they tried to time with the fading thunder. With raw survival no longer at stake, Manny knew the dire situation was starting to hit home. With no one challenging him, Thatcher continued, his voice a little louder. "Should we head below? Now? After all that has happened? Now on this pitch black night? Now when we would all be alone down there?" The question hung in the air like stars. "I don't want to," admitted Aaron. "I hate it down there," added Henry. Manny looked at him. He was a strange boy. He seemed to live in his head and had barely been seen or heard since the loss of his master. "I do too." This time the voice came from right beside Manny. It was Mario. Manny flashed a quick warning look. "Don't forget," it said. There was no need for more. Mario knew the reason well. The darkness below might hide dangers, but it hid secrets too. Mario shrugged and added, There is something bad down there, and now, with no men left, with Owen still locked in silence, all eyes turned to Manny, who let out a long sigh, then an admission. There is something bad down there. Something wrong. Something, said Thatcher, or someone. Aaron gasped, and Manny barely managed to avoid doing the same. Once again, Thatcher had dared to speak the unspeakable, and in doing so, he had broken down a dam. The stories began to flow forth, and they weren't normal stories. They were ghost stories. I've seen things, whispered Aaron. The room went silent, and Manny stared back at Aaron. Even Owen glanced up from his cup. What have you seen? Coaxed Thatcher, the pale scar above his left eyebrow glowing softly in the lamplight, giving him an expression both curious and strange. Well, Aaron began. Manny leaned in a little closer. It's shadows, mostly. It's hard to say. It's also so dark down there. Manny pictured the world below deck. There were no windows at all. During the day, light filtered in through any open grates or hatches on the deck. But at night, in foul weather, there was barely any light. A lamp hanging fore and aft, and maybe a trickle of moonlight at most. There might be other lamps burning in the officers' berths or the carpenter's cabin, but precious little good that did the crew. Aaron went on. So when I say shadows, it could be just a shadow of a shadow under a full moon. But the thing is, Thatcher cut in, the shadow doesn't look right. Everyone turned to look at him. It doesn't move right. Yes, Aaron agreed. That's exactly it. It looks human enough when the light catches it, but the way it moves, shuffles along at first, well, I thought it was poor old Ricketts, but then he took to the sickbed. This time it was Mario cutting in, and the shadow haunted us all the more. Manny shot another warning look over, but Mario ignored it. I saw it too. Always late at night, always out of the clue of my eye, along the wall, at the door, never out in the open. And then there's the sound, added Aaron. A horrible sound. He searched for the word, then found it. A dragging. A dry, raw scraping, added Thatcher. Manny eyed him carefully. Thatcher was throwing fuel to the fire. What was he up to? The story below deck was that Thatcher had come from a respected Boston family that had been ruined. A rich family turned poor. His fine education was cut short, and being the youngest of the brothers, he was sold into servitude to help pay off the family's debts. Is this true? Manny wondered. Thatcher definitely talked the part, but he didn't get those scars at a piano lesson. Shadows? Sounds? Said Olin, finally putting down his cup and looking up. That could have been anything. The ship is full of sights and sounds at night. A crewmate on the way back from the head? Rats in the scuppers? Owen's words trailed off. He looked small, sitting in the big chair. Thatcher looked down at him, and a slow smile spread across his face. His other scar, the one on his cheek, folded over on itself, like a white worm wreathing. Aye, no doubt, so many sights and sounds, but then, of course, there's the smell. Owen looked away, and that's when Manny knew he'd seen something too. Seen it and heard it and smelled it. Thatcher went on, choosing his words with care. A smell like rotting flowers at their sweetest just before they turn brown and fall away. That was the worst part, said Aaron. The shadow would shuffle across some dark corner, scraping its way by fingernails on some stone, and then, when you were lying there telling yourself it was just your imagination, or a dream, added Mario. Aaron nodded. Just then, you'd smell it. The dense funk of the crew and all their earthly odors turned into a field of dying flowers, said Thatcher. The cabin was silent for a moment. Not like a flower, said Henry. It had been so long since he'd spoken that Manny had almost forgotten he was there, but all eyes were on him. He shifted uncomfortably at the attention. What did you say? Said Thatcher, a hint of warning in his voice. It's just that I'm a botanist assistant. Well, I was, and I had smelled something like that before. It's sweet, as you say, but more like fungus. Well, certain funguses. He descended into mumbling. Sticky, sickly, sweet, to be sure, but a certain yeastiness to it. quite unmistakable. Once, Thatcher abruptly cut him off. I tell you what it is, he spat. Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, thought Manny. It's old Macy. Manny's blood went cold. He said it. The thing is, Obed liked flowers, said Thatcher, at least before he took to the chest down into the hole and disappeared for good. What do you mean, said Aaron. I was with him when he came back from the shore once. I'd spent my money on sweets, but all he got for his was a sad bunch of cut flowers. What are those for? I asked him. And do you know what he said? Thatcher looked around the room. What? Breathed Mario. For me, pillow, said Thatcher, imitating Ob's voice and an accent perfectly. So me dark little world don't smell so bad. More silence. That's right, crowded Thatcher. It's a hard life being in a hold rat. You think the smells are bad where you lay your heads? Try working in the hold, walking over all that stinky, sloshing bilge water. You're more liable to step upon a drowned rat than a dry wood. Thatcher glared around the room, daring anyone to challenge his claims. I'm the hold rat now, but I'll tell you something funny, something most peculiar. He paused, and Manny knew for certain that he would say the next would not be funny at all. I've been all through that hold looking for his body. Haven't found a thing. But it smells awfully sweet down there these days. It's him, said Aaron. Old Macy. Thatcher nodded solemnly, but then another thought occurred to Aaron. Or it could be old Ricketts and his perfume. Thatcher cocked his head, considering this new possibility. Manny groaned softly. It was all over. 2 potential ghosts were simply too many for the young crew. By a vote 5-2, the decision was made. The survivors would sleep above deck until they reached port or sank the ship trying. Of course, you two are welcome to sleep down there, Thatcher said to the no voters, Owen and Manny. Owen let out a dismissive snort and said, like I trust you urchins alone in the captain's cabin. The silver in here belongs to my family, you know. Whether Owen meant to or not, Thatcher flinched when he had heard those words. So his family had sold him off after all, thought Manny, along with the silverware, no doubt. Manny shot Mario another look. It was less of a warning this time. Mario's yes vote had already been cast, and more of a plea. I hope you know what you're doing. Sharing this little cabin might feel safer, even cozy to the others, but it was a little too close for comfort for them. Reluctantly, Owen unhinged the broken door, and the young crew shuffled out into the night. The rain had stopped, and the dark clouds had begun to pull apart. A hint of moonlight shined down on the deck of the ship, rocked gently to and fro. Owen and Aaron removed first the long wooden battens and then the thick tarpaulin cover from the aft hatch with sure, practiced hands. As they waited to head below and retrieve their meager possessions, the others took deep breaths of fresh salt air. All of them hoped it would be the sweetest thing they'd smell that night. All right, guys, that's the next chapter. We'll see you tomorrow with Chapter 6.